My name is Aaron Cross, and what I'm about to tell you isn't easy. It's a story of being silenced in my own home, erased in front of strangers, and learning the hard way that freedom sometimes means walking away from blood. Stay with me, because once you hear this, you'll never look at family loyalty the same way again. Before we begin, take a second to subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Every message reminds me I'm not speaking into the dark. It gives me the courage to keep sharing the truth. The last words I heard from my parents before storming out were, "We regret ever having you." My chest burned, but I held my ground. I answered, "If that's how you feel, treat me as though I was never here." Then I left, footsteps striking the floor like warning shots. Less than half an hour later, my phone blazed with 29 missed calls, all from the same people who had just erased me. That morning it started with hope. From my top-floor apartment in Riverbend, I watched the skyline glow before sunrise. Today should have been mine, the end of years of all-nighters, endless unpaid household expenses, and the grind of my graduate business program. For once, I wanted to feel like the spotlight was mine. The first buzz on my phone broke that illusion. A message from my mother ordered me to let Clara Cross sit in the middle at the reception. Seconds later, my father added, "Don't boast about that high-stakes corporate deal. It makes you sound arrogant." Even on my day, the center belonged to someone else. When I walked into the kitchen, Noah Hale was waiting with 2 coffees. His grin was steady, the kind he'd carried since high school. "This is your moment, Aaron. Don't let them steal it." I tried to smile back, but inside I twisted. On campus, banners rippled in the warm air as graduates lined up. When my name was called, Dr. Langford embraced me and whispered, "You're one of the sharpest minds I've taught. Don't forget it." At the reception, Jenna Brooks clapped my back. "You saved that deal when no one else could. Tonight, we celebrate." Their pride felt real, until my phone buzzed again. The venue had adjusted the advance, adding 2 tables at my family's request. My bank account was deducted without my consent. That afternoon, I stood over the Riverbend Bridge, watching the water flash under the sun. I pulled out my brown notebook and scrawled, "I don't want to be used anymore. I want to be seen." Before I could shut it, another message arrived. "Clara, we need to talk tonight. It's important." Back home, I checked the seating chart. My friends and colleagues were shoved near the kitchen door. My family's names dominated the center, Clara's printed in bold across the main table. Mine looked like an afterthought. For a moment I considered canceling it all, but instead I slipped my phone into my pocket, recorder running. If they humiliated me again, I would have proof. As night fell, headlights crawled down Michigan Avenue. I buttoned my ash-gray suit and told the mirror, "Tonight they will see me." But Clara's blinking message pulsed like a wound I couldn't ignore. The walk across campus pulled me back years to when I first learned what invisibility felt like. Back in Fairhaven, Montana, I had been a mid-teen kid who won the statewide math competition. I came home with the medal warm against my chest. My father barely glanced before turning to a neighbor. "Clara's already drafting her pre-med essays. She'll be the pride of this family." The medal might as well have been tin. Then came my birthday. Balloons, sheet cake, classmates crowded into our small living room, but the icing screamed in red, "Happy birthday, Clara." My own name was squeezed into a corner like an afterthought. Friends laughed, assuming it was. As a prank, I laughed too, though something cracked inside. It was Noah back then, just another awkward kid from the math club who leaned close and whispered words I never forgot. "You don't need their permission to shine." I didn't know then how much I'd cling to that. Aaron braces for a night where his family might once again erase him, but this time, he's recording everything. One hot afternoon, while clearing out boxes in the garage with my father, I uncovered a folder marked Education Savings File. My hands trembled as I opened it. Every withdrawal was tagged for Clara Cross. Prep courses, lab equipment, application consultants. The balance was nearly empty. My name didn't appear once. Before I could process it, my mother snatched the file away. "You're the older one," she said sharply. "You'll end up in finance. You'll learn fast. Clara needs this more." Her words cut like glass. That night, I slipped my statewide math competition medal into a shoebox under my bed, beside old notebooks. It gathered dust while Clara's awards filled the mantel. At family dinners, every story circled back to her. I faded into the background of my own life. Only years later did I realize the truth. That fund had been meant for both of us. By the time I applied to school, it was drained dry. That's why I worked late at a coffee shop, filled out scholarship forms by lamplight, and survived on instant noodles while Clara's tuition was covered without question. I still remember Aunt Ruth pulling me aside once, lowering her voice. "Don't tell your mother I said this, but they mapped your path years ago." She pressed my shoulder, leaving me with a truth I wasn't ready to carry, that I'd never be allowed center stage. So I chose economics, fast, practical, get through school, land a job, find my own place, stop being a burden. At Grey Ridge University, I lived small. A mattress on the floor, a desk salvaged from the curb, a calendar stuffed with shifts. 3 mornings a week, I opened the campus cafe at dawn, the air thick with beans and bleach. On other nights, I typed legal case numbers in a law office until my fingers went numb. Every month, I wired money home. At first, it felt like proof I mattered. Soon, it was routine. Eventually, it became invisible. When my initial salary arrived, I celebrated by buying my mother a blue shawl from a city outlet shop, the one she had once admired in a catalog. I wrapped it carefully with a note promising one day I'd do more. That night, my father texted, "Clara needs a new anatomy set. Can you send extra?" No mention of the shawl. No mention of me. The requests developed a rhythm. Urgent, last minute, unavoidable. "Her lab slot won't be released unless we pay today." The clinic added a surprise fee. Household expenses and penalties came in late again. I moved money between accounts like sand slipping through fingers, always telling myself this would be the last emergency. And every time, another one arrived. Clara and I still spoke in the narrow cracks siblings find when the storm gets heavy. She'd call late from the lab, exhausted, grateful, telling me about professors who finally noticed her, or patients who broke her heart in equal measure. She never asked for money outright, it always came through our parents. That made it easier to pretend we were on the same side, that someday there would be a reckoning and everything I'd given would finally be acknowledged. Noah Hale was my checkpoint. After double shifts, he'd slide a hot sandwich across the counter and say, "You're wearing yourself thin." I'd shrug and insist I was fine, repeating the lie until it almost sounded true. At night, in my cramped room, I opened a blank spreadsheet. With a deep breath, I typed a title I didn't want to admit to. Family Ledger. Row by row, I listed every transfer, every bill, every bailout. The numbers stacked like a confession only I would ever see. By the summer before my final year of school, the emergencies turned into alarms. My mother's voice shook on the phone. "They need a guarantor for Clara's tuition. Just for a few weeks until your father's papers clear." I signed the cosigner form at a library computer, heart pounding, telling myself it was temporary. Months later, a bank officer called. The loan had been restructured and extended, with my name still locked as guarantor. I lay staring at the ceiling fan, the blades a blur, the weight crushing. We had promised it would be removed. That evening, Clara texted, "I thought they took your name off. I'm sorry." I wanted to believe her, and I did. Aaron realizes he's not just helping. He's legally trapped in a debt meant for someone else, with no way out. I never wanted an enemy. I only wanted a family that kept their promises. After finishing school, I landed a junior analyst role in Riverbend, squeezed into an apartment so small I could touch both walls with outstretched arms, and taught myself how to breathe again. The city gave me edges sharp enough to lean on. Work noticed me in ways home never had. I rose, I proved useful, but the money transfers back home never stopped. When the company bumped me into strategy, I called to share the good news. My mother's first question was about Clara Cross's board exams. My father asked if I could front the fees, promising to settle later. Later never arrived. The shawl I had bought my mother years ago showed up in a family photo, not around her shoulders but folded beneath a glass vase, a decoration. I told myself it didn't matter. It was only fabric, only money, only a role I was forced to play until they saw me as more. By the time I applied for the graduate business program, I had mastered the language of crisis. I spent days cutting deals with vendors and nights bargaining with my own family. When my acceptance arrived, I laughed so hard it sounded like a cough. I packed 3 boxes, told myself this degree would finally change the equation, and moved into the Eastview district. Several years later, on commencement morning, a digital calendar invite slid onto my screen titled Pre-Dinner Planning. My mother's message was clinical, the main table reserved for Clara and her side of the family. My colleagues shuffled to an overflow table by the service hall. "We've arranged a seat of honor for your sister," she added, as if I had asked. I stared at the glowing red ledger file in my dock, then tied my tie. If they pushed me to the edges again, I needed to know how far I would go. The Harborview restaurant sparkled like a postcard. Low jazz, warm light, crystal glasses catching every flicker. Noah Hale bumped my shoulder on purpose, the way he always did when I drifted too far inward. Dr. Langford swept in wearing a pearl gown and hugged me tight. Jenna Brooks waved from the bar, her laugh carving a space through the noise. For a heartbeat, it felt clean. Then my parents arrived, rehearsed smiles already fixed. They greeted me briefly before pivoting hard, presenting Clara like the centerpiece of a stage. "This is our Clara," my mother said proudly. "She saves lives." My father shook Jenna's hand and asked what it was like to work with someone who sat at a desk all day. The taste of iron filled my mouth. I glanced at the floor plan the maitre d' had posted. Under a ring of pendant lights, the central table glowed with Clara's name card beside my mother's. My own was printed on a corner table shoved against the kitchen door, steam and clatter spilling out with each swing. My friends, the people who had carried me, were banished there with me. When a colleague asked if my parents were proud, my mother gave a thin smile. "He's good with numbers," she said. "But Clara saves lives." Jenna raised her glass to toast the deal I had salvaged that spring. How it prevented collapse, kept 1,000 families in work. My father cut in politely. "That's his job. It's not the same." The room absorbed his judgment like a spill spreading across the tablecloth. I clenched my jaw, reminded myself of the river, the notebook, the vow I had written earlier that day. Beneath the table, Noah pressed a steady hand to my shoulder. "This isn't on you," he whispered. Behind us, a distant aunt muttered to her husband, "Aaron has money, but no soul." I didn't turn. I fixed on the candle in front of me and watched the flame shiver. On my way back from the restroom, I caught Clara leaning toward a residency friend, voice hoarse. "If Aaron hadn't covered the bills, I'd have collapsed long ago. But they'll never admit it." Her eyes widened when she noticed me. She looked away. I nodded and kept walking, the unspoken truth hanging between us like a shadow neither of us could name. Aaron finally hears Clara admit the debt owed to him, but only in secret, never where the family could hear. I wanted to tell Clara that knowing the truth didn't make it easier to carry. Back at the table, my phone buzzed. A coworker had tagged me in a post. When I opened it, the video showed the glowing centerpiece table. The caption read, "The doctor's family is the star tonight." The camera swept across familiar faces, then cut away before reaching mine. A second buzz followed, an updated invoice from the venue. My name stood at the bottom, my card listed as payment. The note read, "Thank you for hosting this celebration. Congratulations to Dr. Clara." Across the room, my parents laughed, telling a cousin how they had put everything together for their daughter, who made them proud. Something in me locked into place, not a snap, but a steady click. I tapped my glass with a spoon. The sound grew, voices tapering one by one until the room hushed. Jenna Brooks froze mid-sentence. Dr. Langford folded her hands. Noah Hale watched me the way you watch someone lean too close to the edge of a cliff. I rose. Shoulders squared, lungs full, I steadied my voice. If I'm nothing more than the wallet, then let's be honest about who kept the lights on. The jazz trailed off. Forks clinked down. My voice carried into the silence. I covered the power bills when the notices came red. I paid the late fees. I guaranteed loans I was told were temporary, yet my name was never released. Month after month, I sent money so others could breathe while I scraped by. The air rippled with whispers. My father's face flushed red. "You ungrateful child," he barked, louder than the moment required. "We regret ever having a son so disrespectful." The words struck like a door slamming shut. I stared at the trembling candle flame until it steadied again. "If that's what you truly want," I answered calmly, "then treat me as if I was never here." Chairs creaked. A cousin gasped. Jenna's eyes lit with a fierce kind of loyalty I had never felt from family. I set down my glass, the crystal clicking against wood, and turned. My footsteps beat a steady rhythm across the hardwood as I passed the maitre d' and pushed through the brass-handled door into the hallway that smelled of citrus cleanser and cold air. "Aaron." Noah's voice called after me, but I lifted a hand without turning. "Let me go alone." He slowed, and in that pause, I felt the clean edge of something ending. The lobby lights flattened everything into a scene from a film. Outside, the district hummed with neon. A message lit my phone before the door closed behind me. "Aaron, I'm sorry. I know what you've done." I was afraid to say it. "Clara." I stood under the awning as the valet whistled for a cab, staring at the words until they blurred. I typed nothing. In the taxi, rain streaked the windows, city lights bleeding red and white across the glass. My phone buzzed like an insect trapped in a jar. Calls from my mother, my father, Aunt Ruth, even colleagues unsure how to answer the silence I had left. I let every call pass. By the time I reached my building, the river below scattered the city's reflection into broken coins. I climbed the stairs, unlocked my door, and entered the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. The phone lit the counter again, 29 missed calls. I counted them, because counting is what I do when chaos has no shape. 29 times they tried to pull me back in, 29 times I chose not to return. Another email slid across the screen, crisp and polite. "Thank you for your payment. Congratulations to Dr. Clara." I laughed once, the sound breaking at the end, half humor, half fracture. Aaron finally severs himself, yet even freedom tastes bitter, his name erased from the night he paid for. Even the receipt spoke their language. I powered down the phone and silence swallowed the apartment. Shoes off, I drifted to the window. The river cut through the city like a black seam, stitched with light. Somewhere back at the Harbor View restaurant, a candle flickered out. I pressed my forehead to the glass and whispered to no one but the street below. "Tonight, I'm free, even if freedom costs me." By morning, the quiet was broken. When I turned the phone on, messages flooded in like a breached dam. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone," my father scolded. "Blood comes first, unless you think you're too good for us," my mother wrote. Cousins wrapped their criticism in false concern. Clara's message was softer. "Please don't hate me." I flipped the phone face down, breathing against the weight. "Work." The order returned. Numbers aligned, outputs made sense. Jenna Brooks leaned against my doorway without knocking. "You said the truth. I'm proud of you." Her words landed gently where the family had bruised. Hours later, an email from Dr. Langford arrived. "Your voice is clear. Keep it that way." Reading it was like drinking water after days of salt. That evening, while I reheated noodles, the intercom buzzed. My mother's voice floated up, smooth and practiced. "We're here. Let us up." The knock at my door came in that familiar rhythm I hadn't heard in years. My mother stood in front, Aunt Ruth at her side, my father behind them with his jaw locked tight. They stepped forward without asking. I stayed planted in the doorway. "We need to talk," my mother began. "Clara's program has expenses. It's your responsibility as the son to help your sister." That word, responsibility, tightened around my neck like a rope. My responsibility ended, I said evenly, when you told me I didn't deserve to exist. The air collapsed into silence. Aunt Ruth stared at the hallway carpet. My father's eyes swept the apartment, measuring square footage like it could be translated into debt. Then Clara's name lit my phone. I lifted the screen. Her face appeared, red-eyed, in the hospital corridor behind her. I knew, she said, voice wavered. I knew you were carrying it all. I should have spoken sooner, but I was afraid stepping out of the light would erase everything I'd worked for. Before I could answer, my father cut in, flat, final. We needed someone to handle finances. That's what you were born to do. That's how families work. Don't dramatize it. The words clicked in my head like a key turning a lock I'd been rattling my whole life. I set the phone down, Clara's image glowing on the console, and pulled a dark portfolio binder from the shelf. Inside was the red ledger I had printed 8 years ago, the record of every bill, every loan, every bailout. I handed it to my mother. This is nearly a decade, I said. Rent, medicine, winter gas, penalties, tuition loans I guaranteed. You don't need to thank me, but you can't pretend it never happened. They turned the pages in silence. Finally, my mother pushed it back like it was poisoned. That's what an eldest son does. It isn't generosity, it's duty. Heat rose through me, then broke like a fever. No, I said. It was love. And you kept calling it duty, so you wouldn't have to love me back. I narrowed the doorway, making the space smaller. From this day forward, you'll figure it out without me. I am not the family's wallet anymore. Aunt Ruth's lips trembled, but stayed closed. My father stiffened, but his authority felt hollow. The elevator chimed down the hall. A dog barked twice and went quiet. Aaron, my mother tried to say, her voice reaching back to when I was 8. I shook my head once, not at her, but at the past. I hope Clara finds her own balance. I hope you all find your own way, but I'm finished. I eased the door until the frame pressed their shoes back. Take care of yourselves. Then I closed it. The latch caught sharp and final. Knuckles hammered the wood, voices flinging old names, selfish, dramatic, ungrateful, like ghosts pounding on a house already abandoned. I slid down until I was seated against the door, tears spilling, not hot with rage, but hollow with release. The pounding thinned, then silence, then only the elevator cables whined as they left. In the quiet, the river hummed steadily through the city. Its pulse didn't care about family scripts. Aaron has broken the lock, but in the silence afterward, he's left to wonder what a life without their shadow really looks like. I wiped my face with my sleeve and glanced around the small apartment that had carried me through late nights and early mornings. For a moment, the image of that blue shawl shoved under a vase flicker, ed in my memory, then faded for good. I set my phone beside the closed, dark portfolio binder and felt the weight lift. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. The door behind me was just wood and hinges, but to me it was a line drawn in stone. On my side of it, air. On my side, space enough to live. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in work. I showed up early, stayed late, and tackled projects that others avoided. Every edge left raw from the fight with my parents was poured into strategy decks and negotiations. Within months, I was steering a multinational deal that had been on the verge of collapse. Jenna Brooks introduced me in meetings as if I already belonged at the partners' table. Colleagues began to look at me not as the quiet analyst in the background, but as someone who drove momentum. Then one morning, as the first light touched Riverbend, an email from Dr. Langford appeared. She had heard of the deal I saved. Her message was short, but cut to the bone. You are living proof that grit and intelligence don't need permission. I read it 3 times, each line pressing into me like a hand steadying my back. That afternoon, I opened Career Connect under an anonymous profile. For the first time, I wrote out my truth. What it meant to be the invisible child, the wallet for a family that never once said thank you. The graduate pushed to the corner on his own night. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I ended with a line carved straight from my bones. Quiet strength speaks louder than revenge. I hit the post, expecting nothing. By evening, it had gone wild. Thousands of shares, hundreds of confessions. Strangers wrote, "I was invisible too. You put into words what I've carried for years." For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. A week later, Jenna stepped into my office, grin sharp. "They want you at the Resilience in Business conference to tell your story." On stage, under the lights, I spoke. Not about names, but about weight, resilience, and what happens when you stop waiting for permission to exist. The applause rose like a tide and broke over me. I walked off lighter than I had in years. That fall, I moved into a top-floor apartment with Ironwood Lake stretching wide outside the windows. The first night, Noah and Jenna stood with me on the balcony. We raised glasses of sparkling cider, laughing at the absurdity of the view. "Family," Noah said, clinking his glass to mine. I nodded, throat tight. It wasn't blood. It was better. News of my rise spread fast. Old neighbors whispered to my parents. Cousins forwarded articles. Emails trickled in, first angry. "You've abandoned us." Then desperate. "Clara needs help." I answered with silence. Late one night, Clara's message appeared. "I'm sorry, I knew how much you carried. I just wasn't brave enough to speak. I hope someday you forgive me." I set the phone down. Some wounds can't be patched with words. By summer, I hosted a dinner in my new place. No charts, no hierarchy, just pizza boxes on marble counters, bottles of wine breathing open, and the people who had chosen me. Noah sprawled on the sofa, retelling stories of our math club days. Jenna leaned back, laughter spilling. Dr. Langford raised her glass. "Aaron, you've redefined resilience in this field." I stood, voice steady. "Once, my own family told me I didn't deserve to exist, but I've learned worth isn't defined by blood or old scripts. Real families are the ones who choose you, not because they must, but because they want to." Applause filled the room, warm and real. Noah hugged me hard enough to make me laugh. "You earned this, man, every bit of it." Halfway through the night, my phone lit up with 5 missed calls from my mother. I flipped it face down. No hesitation. The laughter rolled on, untouched. Later, IOP, and an email from Aunt Ruth. "You deserve joy. Don't let them pull you back. I'm proud of you." Tears slipped free before I could stop them. Maybe not all of the bloodline was poison. Online, my anonymous post had sparked something larger. The phrase "invisible no more" spread like wildfire. Messages poured in from strangers. Thank yous, confessions, promises to break their own chains. My story had grown beyond me. It belonged to everyone who had ever been made small and dared to stand tall. That night, when the last guest left, I walked to the window. The city glowed endless, the river carving silver through towers. I opened my brown notebook one last time and wrote, "Aaron Cross, free man. A new chapter begins." I slid the red ledger into a drawer and turned the key. The debt was closed. The past accounted for. Leaning against the glass, I whispered, "If you've ever been told you don't matter, remember, you do. Build the family you choose. Freedom is waiting, and no one can take it away." The city answered in silence. For once, silence felt like love.